I'm going to call this joint subcommittee meeting of the Housing and Zoning subcommittees to order. Mr. Clerk, could you please call the roll?
From the Zoning Subcommittee, Councilor Drinkwater.
Here.
Councilor Leahy.
Here.
Councilor Yem.
Here.
From the Housing Subcommittee, Councilor Yem.
You here?
Councilor Drinkwater.
Here.
Councilor New.
Here.
All present.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. The purpose of this meeting is to continue discussions that had previously occurred in this joint subcommittee regarding a motion that was filed by Councilor Robinson and myself requesting the City Council begin conversations around zoning and ADUs with focus on potential increase in housing stock. This subcommittee has met jointly twice previously to discuss a draft ordinance that was brought forward by the Department of Planning and Development. It has been a little bit of a hiatus in discussions of the subcommittee. Part of the reason was because I know after a couple of discussions, both members of the council as well as the public wanted some time to digest the ordinance that was brought forward, and after several scheduling issues and things like that, and a lot of interest in this issue from the community, getting a lot of asks about when this discussion would continue. Wanted to make sure that we got another subcommittee meeting scheduled. So thank you everybody for making time to be here. I see that there are a number of members of the public in the chamber. I know we have a brief summary just of kind of where we are and how we've got here from DPD that I want to open with in a minute. But before doing so, I just want to try to make sure we give anybody who's here time to speak. Can I just see a quick show of hands on how many people here in the chamber would like to speak tonight? All right, quite a few. So we will try to get through the presentation and also our comments from up here fairly quickly. I know a lot has already been said on the topic. And I will ask that when we do open it up to the public to speak, just given the amount of interest and the number of speakers, that we ask everyone to keep their comments to 3 minutes, just so we can try to accommodate everybody here tonight. So with that, unless there are any other comments from members of the subcommittee,
We would like to recognize Councilor Gutierrez here, and Councilor Robinson and Councilor Mercier, who joined us today. Thank you so much.
as well as Director of the Department of Planning and Development, Giovanni Baez-Rose, Senior Planner, Francesca Sigliano, and City Solicitor Helene Tomlinson are all here joining us as well. So thank you for being here. So with that, I do want to turn it over to just a brief presentation by Francesca Sigliano from DPD. So Fran, all yours.
Thank you, Councillor. So we'll just move into the presentation. Could we get that projected on the monitors, please? Thank you. So I'm here today presenting proposed zoning changes that would modify our existing zoning regulations to allow accessory dwelling units on single-family residential lots in Lowell. There are two key elements of this proposal. In an effort to minimize the aesthetic impact, we are proposing that ADUs would need to be either A, attached to the primary structure, or a conversion of an existing accessory structure that exists as of the adoption of the ordinance, or is at least 10 years old and complies with all setback and size requirements for accessory structures pursuant to Section 4354 and Section 4.4. These changes were drafted in response to a council motion on June 14th, 2022 by Councilor Drinkwater and Councilor Robinson, asking the City Council to begin conversations about zoning and ADUs with a focus on a potential increase in the housing stock. Just for some background on accessory dwelling units, an accessory dwelling unit is an independent housing unit with its own kitchen, bathroom, living, and sleeping space. These units are smaller than and accessory to a primary residence. There are many neighboring cities and towns that allow ADUs. In fact, all of the cities and the towns that border Lowell allow ADUs already. So Tingsboro, Dracut, Tewksbury, Billerica, and Chelmsford, as well as Westford, Dunstable, and Pepperell. ADUs can take many forms. They can be detached structures, attached, or a separate space within the primary dwelling. So a lot of them are in basements or in areas above garages, but they can also be in an accessory structure that's detached from the primary structure. Some reasons that this proposed amendment is coming to light. Number one, to provide more affordable housing in Lowell. Two, to provide housing options for seniors and adult children. And then three, allowing ADUs aligns with sustainable development and smart growth principles. How do ADUs provide affordable housing? They would add to the supply of housing in Lowell. They tend to rent for less than is typical for a neighborhood where an ADU is located, promoting mixed income neighborhoods. Usually they're smaller than market rate apartments, which lends to the less expensive price. They can provide additional income to a homeowner, making homeownership more sustainable and promoting neighborhood sustainability. And many of the units are not rented on the market and actually house family members or friends. Currently, we do allow ADUs in the urban neighborhood single-family zoning district by special permit. And we also allow attached in-law suites so long as the second living area is free-flowing with the primary living area and does not have any locked doors. The suite is not considered a separate dwelling unit and may not be rented. So now getting into the text of the zoning amendment. ADUs shall not be constructed without a building permit from the Division of Development Services. The building permit must include proof of ownership and floor plan elevations. Proof of owner occupancy must be provided with a notarized letter stating that the owner will occupy one of the dwelling units on the premises as the owner's primary residence, which must be recorded at the Registry of Deeds, and a copy must be submitted to the Division of Development Services. So we're recommending an owner occupancy stipulation. All ADUs must obtain certificates of occupancy from the Division of Development Services, and that could be revoked if any conditions in this section are not met. By filing a building permit, the owner's consent to inspection by the building commissioner or their designee to ensure compliance with this ordinance. And upon sale of the property, the owner shall be required to file a new application with the Division of Development Services to maintain the ADU. So whenever the property would change hands, the new owner would need to reapply and ensure that all of these conditions are still met. Some additional requirements outlined in the ordinance. The use of the property must be a single-family residential use. Not more than one accessory dwelling unit shall be located on a single property. At least one owner of the property must reside on either the primary dwelling unit or in the accessory dwelling unit. It may not be sold separately from the principal dwelling. The accessory unit must be clearly subordinate in size, use, and design to the principal dwelling. It must be capable of being discontinued as a separate dwelling unit without demolition of any structural component of the principal dwelling. Short-term rentals are prohibited in Lowell in general, so they would not be allowed as accessory dwelling units either. Utilities for the accessory unit, such as water, electric, and gas, shall be extensions of the existing utilities serving the primary dwelling. No new utilities or meters shall be installed for the use of the accessory dwelling unit. Additional conditions. This is just saying that the ADU may be located in a detached accessory structure that exists as of the adoption of this ordinance, or which has been in existence for at least 10 years and complies with section 4354 and section 4.4. So the accessory structure would need to meet all of the setback requirements and size restrictions that are outlined in our existing accessory structure section in the zoning ordinance. The accessory dwelling unit shall require one off-street parking space. An additional entrance exclusively for the ADU shall not be located facing the street unless it is located below the main level of the house and is substantially concealed from view from the public way. The ADU shall not be less than 350 square feet and not more than 35% of the gross floor area of the principal dwelling. Next, a special permit is required if the proposal cannot meet the conditions set forth in section 4384. And the special permit would be, the special permit granting authority would be the Zoning Board of Appeals. And then finally, the accessory dwelling unit shall terminate immediately upon any violation of any term or condition of this ordinance that the owner fails to cure upon 2 weeks of written notice mailed to primary dwelling unit address by certified mail, return receipt requested. And the duties upon termination shall include discontinuing the use of the accessory dwelling unit as a separate dwelling unit. The kitchen facilities shall be removed unless determined by the building commissioner or their designee that they are incidental and subordinate as an accessory use of the principal structure. Any additional exterior entrance constructed to provide access to the accessory living space shall be permanently closed unless the building commissioner or their designee provides a waiver. The owner shall permit an inspection by the building commissioner or their designee. And then finally, this is the table of accessory uses where we currently have the use accessory dwelling unit added to a single family home. Currently, it's only allowed by special permit in the urban single family zoning district, but we're proposing to allow it in all districts in terms of the zone because this would only apply to single family uses, and single family uses exist in all zones throughout the city because there are pre-existing non-conforming lots. For example, in the regional retail zoning district, there are single family lots in that district. So we're proposing to allow it by right in all districts, but that would be restricted to just single family homes in that district. So I'm happy to answer any questions that the council may have. Thank you.
At this time, if there are any questions on the presentation, I'll open it up to members of the subcommittee or members of the council who are present. I'll just ask that we keep the, at this time, keep the comments specifically on the presentation, to any clarifying or remarks or questions, because I do want to move into the public speaking portion of the meeting just to ensure everyone has time to speak, and we'll open it up for more general comments from colleagues at that time. I did see Councilor Robinson.
Thank you. One thing that I'm not seeing in the presentation is how are these going to be impacted? I don't see any members of the fire department here. How would these be impacted with egresses with the fire department, especially in the situation where we're talking interior, lower level? I don't see how that would be addressed. Also, so walk me through this. On the sale of this, I get a permitted ADU. My mother, brother, sister, whoever lives there, we decide to move on. Would this be allowed to be sold as a two-family at this point, technically, because it's that, or is it because the utilities are all shared, it's not classified as that? Also, I personally don't think, I think with something like this, just from talking to my neighbors, a lot of people, this is a tough sell. And so, as far as variances go, I think if we're gonna carve out ADU, I don't like the idea of opening it up to variances in the future. I think that's what we're doing here. So I think if we're gonna carve out an ADU, I'd recommend no variances. This has to be cemented in. And is there any way we could go through GIS and see how many potential properties would even be eligible in the city based on the proposed parameters? So at least we have a general ballpark number of how many we're talking about potentially hitting the market. Thank you.
with respect to the questions, I don't know if Fran or Giovanni have
Yeah,
answers.
so regarding the fire department concerns, when they apply for a building permit, I believe the fire concerns would be reviewed at that time.
Yep.
Regarding the two-family question, no, it would not be classified as a two-family. It would be a single-family home with an accessory dwelling unit. And then I'm forgetting your third question, sorry.
As far as the variances piece, I couldn't support it with the variance piece. And then, would it be possible to go through GIS
Yeah.
and see how many potential properties would actually even be eligible based on these proposed parameters?
Oh, so the variance part of it, I would need to look into that further, but I believe that the state says that a property owner has the right to seek a variance, and maybe that's something the solicitor could confirm, but the right to seek a variance, and the
Just-
proposal is supposed to meet 3 criteria, and it is a process created by the state, so I don't think that we as a municipality can say that this particular section can, someone could not seek a variance from this particular section in the ordinance. I believe that a property owner has the right to seek a variance for any section in our zoning ordinance per 40A, chapter 40A.
Thank you.
And just to close the loop on the GIS question, we could talk to the folks at MIS and our GIS to see if our system currently has enough information on accessory dwelling units in the system so that we can get a ballpark number. So DPD can work with them to get that information.
Thank you. And obviously, the interior lower level ones wouldn't apply, but any of the existing structure ones or the ones that would need the setbacks from surrounding neighbors would probably be easy identifiable. Thank you.
Want to go to the co-chair at this point?
The answer to Councillor Robinson regarding fire safety, because before you rent out the ADU unit, you need to get a smoke certificate from the fire department, and also the permit, rental permit from the city as well. So all of that need to be compliance before the ADU unit can be rented out. So that's my personal experience. That's what we have done in my professional as a real estate broker. So.
Thank you. My only concern is this. With some development, the code is allowing one egress or whatever in the face of the building as long as you have a fire suppression system installed in the building. And I believe that's if it's 4 or more units. So you don't even need a back entrance. As long as you have a fire suppression system installed in the building, you're allowed that one facing entrance point, so to say. There's a property, I believe, on Westford Street that they just did this with. Right. That's the state code. But we're talking about potential basements and things, so yeah. Even if it satisfies that minimum code, right. I mean, I think we need to hear the fire department chime in on this before we make a decision, because yes, it might check that box, but let's talk to the people that are going to be tasked with going into these ADU units and rescuing people, God forbid.
Well, if we step back on the ADU, it's a single home with an existing, like either basement or attic. All of that has to be compliant with the fire department. And before they can rent it, the fire department have to come in, issue a certificate, and then also the rental unit has to be having a certificate based on my personal experience. So they come in, make sure there will be a second egress. Even in the basement, there will be a second egress. The second egress has to have a landing if they don't have a landing. If I come out of the windows, there will be a landing, metal, where I can stand, and then the ladder go down in case of emergency, in addition to the main entrance to the unit. So we're talking about this is a single home with additional either attic or basement. The basement usually have a main entrance come in, and it's a walkout basement that is a second egress, and all of that will be certified and will be compliant by the fire department. And I agree, we should have the fire department have some input into this as well. And the answer your last question, if I'm selling this is not a two-family, it's a single home. In the old day, we call it an in-law apartment, right? But now it's an ADU with certificate from previous owner. Now the new owner come in, they have to reapply to be certified as an ADU unit. So,
Thank you. All set. I had Councilor Getchier first, and I have Councilor Mercier and Councilor Janess.
Thank you, Councilor Drinkwater. Yeah, I want to leave time for people to speak, but I do, when you look at this, it says ADUs are currently allowed in urban neighborhood single-family zoning districts by special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals. I don't see why we need the change. I think that we need to stick to what we have. And most of this stuff is very subjective. It says market rate ADUs tend to rent for more. It's going to drive up the pricing of homes. It's going to make things less affordable for the average person to buy. And I can tell you, my son doesn't want to live in my backyard. If I have $150,000 to add on to my house for an ADU, he wants it as a down payment so he can live on his own. And when I look at this stuff, I just say, we already currently have this in place. And one of the major drivers to this whole thing is we right now, as a city of Lowell, are deficient in even checking on our two families and inspecting those. How are we going to take on more and more and more for these people to inspect when we can't even inspect what we have now? And that's a major issue in this city. I hear it all the time that we're not inspecting these apartments. We hear it all the time about people living in squalor that, you know, the inspections haven't come. And when you're looking at this, I just don't think the city has the means to even inspect what they're going to inspect out of things. And it's sad that we're going to put people in these living conditions eventually. And when they go to sell these homes, we don't know who's going to come in. And we already have people, absentee landlords, all throughout this city that we can't maintain properties. And that's what's going to happen. This is an investor's paradise. We're looking at people coming in here and looking at, okay, how can we make more money off a commercial end? We'll just add on, we'll sell that property afterwards, and no one's going to inspect it, so don't worry about it. And I think the neighborhoods, such as the one that I live in, deserve more than this. If somebody wants to add on, certainly go to Pepperell or Dunstable or Drake-It or Tewksbury as outlined in here. You have Billerica, Chelmsford, Westford, Dunstable, Pepperell, Tingsboro, or Drake-It. We've taken on enough. The city can't keep taking on everybody's pieces, and our quality of life is going down in our neighborhoods. Single families need to stay in this, and if somebody wants to do it, we certainly have the means to do it through the zoning. And I will leave the rest of my time for people to speak, but and there'll be obviously plenty of time at a later date to speak on this issue. But I would not be in favor of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Mercier?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I kind of have the same sentiment that Councilor Getchier has. On looking over this and reviewing it, there are a lot of changes that we're anticipating. We already allow ADUs with the special permit. Why not leave it that way? I know that the housing stock in the city would like to have more housing and opportunities for people. I understand that. But what about the character of the neighborhood? What about the congestion that's going to take place? What about the parking situation? We're going to start taking attics now and offer them for our in-laws. I don't even know that they'd be able to climb the stairs to the attic if it's that steep. I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, you adding a ADU unit, the property is going to change, the price is going to go up, their taxes are going to go up because they have an extra person living there, an extra unit. I just think that we have enough congestion now. I don't want to change the character of the neighborhood. I'm also concerned for example, in the Parks Subcommittee, if we had any changes or, permanent things like this, we'd have to refer it to the Board of Parks because their authority supersedes anything that we could do. So with that being said, after all is said and done, are you going to ask for a recommendation from the planning board to see where they set with this? Because it isn't just what we think, it's a body that supersedes us, and they do. So I would recommend that whatever you decide, if you decide in favor, before it is set in stone, you send it to the planning department and try to let them look at it, because this has nothing to do with the council. We're perusing it, but we're not the official people to make the decision. And so the way that I see this, I'm really not very happy about it. It's not like we don't have any opportunity. We have ADU special permit. We don't have the enforcement. We don't have enough people in City Hall. We can make all the rules and ordinance changes, but if we don't have people that are going to monitor it and look after it, it's going to go haywire, and I'm not going to be allowing that on my vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. With respect to the role of this joint subcommittee, I believe it is within our purview to look at policy, a potential ordinance, and make a favorable or an unfavorable recommendation. And that recommendation can then go to the full city council. It's how all of our subcommittees work. The issue was referred from the full council to the subcommittee. We've had a chance to review it. If it's the will of the body, we will make a recommendation whether or not the full city council should consider it. So I certainly do think it's within our purview. Just wanted to comment on that, and with that, I'll go to Councilor Janess.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a few quick questions for our friends from DPD on this. First one is we're talking about what's available through a special permit currently, and it being available in urban single-family zone. Is USF different than TSF in Lowell? And if so, what's the percentage of each? Do we have more TSF, more USF?
Yeah, so USF is a really small zoning district. I think TSF occupies a lot more space in the city. I don't have the exact percentages, but we could definitely calculate that and provide that to the council. But right now, where accessory dwelling units are only allowed by special permit in this particular zone, it's a really small, it occupies a really small amount of land area. And I, in my time here, haven't seen any applications for an ADU as a result of that.
Okay, so that was kind of where I thought we were in terms of there aren't a whole lot of places in Lowell where you can do this, even with a special permit now. So I think that is something that we should look at and understand as we have this discussion and how we want to move forward. It's not like anyone who has a single-family home can get a special permit now. That's not the case, and I think we should be clear with everybody when we're discussing that. My next question is in relation to the other ADU ordinances that are referenced in the surrounding communities. Would you say the proposed ordinance we have is more restrictive than those, less restrictive, or about the same?
I would need to look into it more, but I will say that this ordinance as proposed is really strict in that we are not proposing to allow any any construction of a new structure. Someone will not be able to come into City Hall, to Development Services, and build an accessory structure that is for an ADU. It would need to either be a conversion of an older structure or within the envelope of the existing primary structure. So in that way, just relative to the Commonwealth, this would be a really strict approach.
Okay, but it sounds like, at least from my perspective, character of the neighborhood isn't going to change much, if at all, if we can't build new structures. Is that correct?
I would agree with that.
Okay. And then my other question, just around the surrounding towns and their ordinances, is just how many ADUs have been built in the surrounding towns, maybe over the past 5 or 10 years. I'm just very curious as to how many of these actually get built when they're allowed. So I'd be interested in that data, if that's something that you guys might be able to find and share with us. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Absolutely.
That's all my questions for now.
Thank you. Seeing, oh, sorry, Councilor Noon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand the effort here by you, Mr. Chairman, and Councilor Robinson in looking into this. The effort is to try to increase the housing stock. This is certainly one way to address the affordable housing crisis that we have and address the housing shortage in the city. I know that accessible development unit can be used to close those housing gap. However, as some councilors already mentioned, we have to do it in a very careful way that respect and conserve the existing neighborhood. I hear too that DPD staff talking about enforcement of it. I know we have roughly 42,000 housing units in the city of Lowell. I know that a number of those permits out there are out of compliance. And even if you have full developmental service staff, you still have to enforce this. We have to find way, we have to look at this very careful as we move forward on this. There's a number of unanswered questions. With regard to, we're talking about short-term rental prohibited. How do we verify or enforce that? Owner-occupied, how do we verify whether or not it's owner-occupied? They may change hands and we may not know about it because the mere fact is that enforcement is out there. It's not out there, right? We're short of that by far. Councilor Mercier spoke on that, and I know Councilor Kachias has talked about that a number of times. It's very difficult subject matters here, but this housing crisis, even our homeless coordinator also spoke to this as well, that to address the homelessness in the city, we have to address the affordable housing and the housing stock in the city, the crisis that we have faced. So, I would not oppose to refer this, to recommend this to the full council, but certainly with condition, if anything at all, I would, before any question being answered, I would ask that we have a 6-month review should the council desire to move on with this, approve this, that a 6-month review by the council to see how it's going. Because clearly, no one better than the resident and the people that work in the city in developmental service will know better than the council do. I will reserve my further comment. I want to hear from the Mr. Chairman, from all the people here who spoke in for or support for or against this, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. At this point, I'm going to open up comment to members of the public, and just as a reminder, I'm going to ask that comments be kept to 3 minutes, and I will be strict in enforcing that, just to give everyone the opportunity.
As you have in the past, Mr.
As it's a very popular issue, so I have had to kind of be somewhat strict with this. So just as you step up to the microphone, there's no particular order. Please identify yourself for the record. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Jerry Frechette. I live at 80 Dunbar Ave, and I'm speaking in the capacity of a resident and somebody that's been a banker for 43 years in the city of Lowell. Has been a senior lending officer for 4 decades. I've been a community reinvestment officer for 2 decades. Done first-time homebuyer training classes for decades, and people that work for me do them now. Using down payment assistance. Councilor Noon has actually a motion on trying to educate people about that. One of the biggest barriers to entry for home ownership, and that's really is what we want to preserve as well, on top of the providing apartments for people. But one of the greatest barriers to entry is down payment, Councilor. And when you start adding income source, an apartment to a building, and I train people to review real estate appraisals, been doing it for decades, okay? And that adds value to the property. Mass Landlord estimates it's 25 to 34% increase in value. What that means when you go to sell that property and you sell it with a legal ADU, that has value to it. So somebody's going to pay more for that. And one of the greatest barriers for entry is a down payment. And then the other part to this is you are taking and Lowell is a playground for investors. It just is. And you're looking at the possibility of these being developed. And when you talk about not changing the character of the neighborhood, if you're a single-family neighborhood and all of a sudden you have apartments and there's rentals all over the place, it changes the character of the neighborhood. It's not going to happen overnight, but what's going to happen, and over time, it's going to be more costly for people to buy into those neighborhoods. There'll be fewer single-family homes. And we cited all those properties. My source is Banker and Tradesman. Anybody that's in the business understands, knows that publication. The medium single-family home value, Westford, $757,500. Chelmsford, $635,000. Tingsboro, $627,500. Billerica, $610,000. Tewksbury, $605,000. Drake at $491,750. Lowell, $445,000. Council, we're the most affordable option out there. And the reason these other communities have ADUs, because they don't have apartments, they don't have 3 families, 4 families, 6 families, 12 families. They don't have the options the city of Lowell has. Right now, you can buy in a nice single-family home in the city of Lowell, and you don't have to leave the city. You start deteriorating that, and the options are going to be for people, if they want to live in a residential neighborhood that's single-family, they're going to move outside the city of Lowell. Other thing is, I did have time to look at the ordinance. In 2006, an effort was made to try to pass ADUs, Counselor, and it failed because of the very issues that we're talking about here. And enforcement was an issue then. It's still an enforcement issue now. And the prior ordinance had more safeguards than what's presented before you tonight. So I would ask you not even to push this forward. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, councilors, thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Dennis Connors. I live at 38 Westview Road, of course, here in Lowell. The opinions I express tonight are my own and do not reflect any organizations that I am associated with. I am a residential commercial appraiser active in the Lowell market for over 35 years. In my day-to-day work, for my bona fides here, I have been involved in the development of many affordable single-family and duplex homes in Lowell, approximating over 156 units, so I realize the need for affordable housing in Lowell and am an advocate for it. In my day-to-day work in this market, many people have asked me my opinion of the accessory dwelling ordinance. I had not read the draft, to be honest, to the last couple of weeks. I looked it up and pulled it off their website. So these are my reactions to it. The units created under the terms of the ordinance have no affordability provision, and in fact, they create market rate rental units. No occupancy requirements stated in the ordinance. The accessory units may be leased to anyone without regard to affordability or residency at market rates. One of the stated purposes of the ordinance is, quote, to preserve the character of the city's neighborhoods, unquote. In my opinion, the ordinance as drafted creates 2-family dwellings that will adversely affect the market value in traditional single-family zone neighborhoods. As in all decisions, the pluses and minuses have to be weighed, but the decision makers should have the appropriate information. Has any professional opinions been obtained relative to the effect on value that the implementation of this ordinance would have? I agree wholeheartedly that we are in need of more housing opportunities in our city, especially affordable units. I think a review of the zoning ordinance may well be a better use of city resources than the adoption of this ordinance, which will create minimal units, especially because of its pre-existing provision. In my practice, I have reviewed many strong, quote, in-law regulations from neighboring communities. I would be in favor of creating a strong, easily understood in-law regulation incorporating many of the provisions of this ordinance, which I think would accomplish most of its stated purposes and not substantially change the characteristics of the neighborhood. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Connors. Just one clarification. There is a requirement in the draft ordinance that there's an occupancy by the owner in either the primary or the accessory unit.
Yeah, I'm talking about a relative,
Oh, that's correct.
yeah.
There's no family
Yeah,
requirement. That's
so I
correct.
mean, the units are free market units, basically.
All right. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Attorney Ron, Ron Gentle. I'm an attorney. I live at 44 Delaware Avenue in Lowell, Massachusetts, Pawtuckaville. Born and raised in the city of Lowell. My wife and I built our house in 1996 in Pawtuckaville. We've lived there since then with our 2 children. Pawtuckaville, where I live, any of the house ranges between the 7,200 square foot and the 10,000 square foot zone. Small footprints for houses in that area. The addition of an ADU, whether it be an add-on dwelling or put into an apartment in the house, is going to increase density in that area, which is already pretty a dense area right at the moment. Now, in my area, it's a single suburban family zone, and that's designed by the city to preserve, promote, and enhance the character of the neighborhoods. While my concerns with the EDUs mainly are for construction and for the enforcement. Over the last couple of years, in my neighborhood, we've had a couple of issues with single-family home residents using their houses for Airbnbs and rental units. Now, I did contact the building department over that. They did send somebody out. Those 2 issues were stopped for a period of time. As we stand here today, those 2 issues have been going on again. So there's lack of enforcement in the city as far as Airbnbs. They are going on in the city of Lowell. They're illegal, but they are going on. And a house that I have in my neighborhood is renting right now, and she's an absentee landlord in a single-family home in the Pawtuckaville area. So my concern, and I echo Councilor Mercier and I echo Councilor Getcher, is enforceability. What is the city going to do to enforce the permitting, the process with these ADUs? I have not heard that here tonight. I've heard these grandiose ideas that we're going to solve the housing shortage, but I have not seen or heard any concrete ideas that are going to be implemented by this subcommittee and by this city before this ordinance is passed. My concern, if we're looking at this clearly, what we need to do is get the building department in order, fund for more inspectors, if that's going to be the case, so that we're in the process and we're in line. If the ADUs do pass, we can look at these. Now, Councilor Getcher did in June 28th, 2022, there was a subcommittee meeting, and he noted to move this process slowly because it is going to affect the quality of life of everyone in the neighborhoods, particularly in single-family neighborhoods. And he asked that we review with all the neighborhoods. Now, this last council cycle, I didn't have one councilor come to my house and ask me what my thoughts were on ADUs. You know, would I be in favor of it? Would I not be in favor of it? I didn't have my Councilor Rourke, who's not here tonight. He didn't come by, ask about the ADUs, but this is it's being put forth by the subcommittee and by the council, I don't think with the input of the neighbors. I have not seen any neighborhood impact study, questionnaire, anything put out to the neighbors with respect to how ADUs are going to affect neighborhoods and the quality of life in those neighborhoods. So I would ask that the city hold off and not even move this thing forward and get the plan in place before they do decide what they're going to do with the ADUs, particularly with Councilor Robinson, who was talking about the fire department. If you're going to put a unit in the cellar, there's going to need to be a separate egress. There's going to have fire departments that's going to have to come in and
Mr. Gentle.
inspect that. That needs to be done, and I have not seen anything here where fire has even been contacted or approached to see what their recommendations and their concerns is with respect to an ADU being...
Mr. Gentle, I'm just going to have to ask you to wrap up just to allow for other speakers. Thank you.
I would ask that it not be put forward.
Thank you. And I do just want, this has come up a few different times tonight with respect to enforcement and existing enforcement, and it's come up in the context of accessory dwelling units in the past. This is something that would apply to any new housing, really, particularly rental housing. I mean, we've celebrated new housing, including rental housing, coming online in the city in the past, in the very recent past. So I don't think there's necessarily a policy in place that we can't produce anything new until we get the house in order, so to speak. If we want to apply that criteria, I think it has to be applied across the board, not just to this particular type of housing. With that, want to move on to any other member of the public who wishes to speak. Please identify yourself for the record. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Justin Ford of 69 Hastings Street. I'm here as a community member, but also representing Cambodia Mutual Assistance Association. I'm here to express my support of the proposed ordinance allowing for the development of accessory dwelling units in the city of Lowell. As we all know, the current housing crisis in Lowell and beyond has left many individuals and households struggling to find affordable housing and adequate housing options. So, ADUs present a unique opportunity to help address this issue by increasing the availability of housing options in our city. First and foremost, I live in the Lower Highlands, and I know that there are several positive impacts that ADUs can have on our community. First and foremost, they provide a cost-effective option for families to live in a desirable location without the cost associated with purchasing or renting traditional homes. ADUs can also help to preserve the character of the existing neighborhood, as they are typically smaller in scale and can be designed to blend in with the existing homes on a property. In addition, ADUs can help provide a source of income for homeowners, as they can be rented out to tenants. Additionally, ADUs offer a solution to the challenges posed by our rapidly aging population, our grandmas and grandpas. As more of our seniors look to age in place, ADUs can provide a way for them to stay in their homes while also accommodating the needs of family members or caregivers. I mean, how awesome would that be? ADUs can also be a great option for young adults, such as myself, looking for a place to live while saving up to purchase their own home. Overall, the benefits of ADUs cannot be understated. By allowing their development in Lowell, we can help to start addressing the housing crisis while also creating more affordable housing options for our residents. This is about being proactive and not reactive. I urge the City Council to move forward with this proposed ordinance, and I encourage all residents to voice their support as well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mary Wamboy. I live at 33 Moore Street, apartment 10 in Lowell, Massachusetts. It's been very exciting to actually sit down there and listen to the councilors exchanging ideas. And one of the things I want you to know is that the housing crisis is not affecting people who are over there. It's people like me. I've lived in Lowell for about 20 years. And for the past 10 years, I've been struggling to get a place to live. And hearing my counselor say that, you know, people who want to provide ADUs should go to some other town, it kind of hurts, because this is my city too. Even if I'm a renter, this is my city. I'm an immigrant, and this is my city. Many of you, your parents, grandparents came the same way or differently from me. But that doesn't make me less American or Lowellian than you. We are not far away. We are not in Chelmsford. We live in Lowell, and we are trying to find a place to stay. That's why I support this ADU motion. When I say to have ADU, to think about an ADU, accessory dwelling units, doesn't necessarily mean that forget inspection, forget enforcement, but we cannot use those reasons to block even the thought of what an ADU unit can do. The future of Massachusetts lies with gateway cities like Lowell. If Lowell wants to continue to be a shining example like any other, like it has been, it welcomed me 20 years ago, it can welcome other people or diversify housing options and continue to lead as a place where people are welcome. And this is how you do it. So having challenges on the path should not be a no to ADU units. Thank you.
Mr. Howell, just one moment before you speak. Just as a result of the time, I'm going to make Mr. Howell the final speaker of the evening. We will continue this meeting. We're going to get it scheduled as soon as possible and going to try to the extent that I can make it really just focused on public testimony. If there's anybody here tonight who intended to speak, who didn't get a chance, who wants to either register their support or opposition, you can see me and I can take your name and just note, register that you are here and are either in support or in opposition of this here tonight. Just want to, anyway, so if you didn't have the chance, I apologize. We'll continue the meeting, again, as soon as we can at a future date. Thank you.
Thank you. Carl Howell, Chief Program Officer at Community Teamwork, also Chair of the Lowell Housing Choice Coalition. I come before you today to advocate in support of the accessory dwelling unit ordinance that has been drafted. ADUs are one tool that the city can use to add more affordable housing units in the city of Lowell and have been proven to be successful in other cities around the country. For an example, the state of California changed their legislation to make ADUs by right. Over the last 6 years, more than 60,000 ADUs have been permitted in the state. By allowing ADUs in our city, we can create more affordable housing options for the community while also providing additional income opportunities for homeowners. Let me first address some of the concerns, some of the common objectives to ADUs. Some opponents argue that ADUs will increase traffic and parking problems in the neighborhood. However, the research and studies have shown that ADUs actually have minimal impact on traffic and parking. In fact, many ADU residents do not even own a car and rely on public transportation or walking to get around. Additionally, ADUs tend to be garage conversions or basement apartments. ADUs have been shown to increase the number of affordable housing units in the city without the need for extensive new construction. Now let's talk about why we need ADUs. According to the recent data, the median home price for the Lowell is over $400,000, while the median rent for a one-bedroom unit is over $1,400 per month and increasing. The high costs of housing make it difficult for families and individuals to find affordable housing. ADUs can provide more affordable housing options for low and middle income families while also providing homeowners with the opportunity to earn additional income. Many families and individuals are struggling to find affordable housing in our city. The benefits of ADUs can provide a solution by allowing homeowners to rent out a portion of their properties to tenants. This will not only help alleviate the affordable housing crisis in our city, but will also help homeowners generate additional income. ADUs can also provide a way for multi-generational families to live together. In many cultures, it is common for multiple generations to live under one roof. ADUs allows families to live together while also providing some privacy and independence. This can help families together and provide a support system for older adults and their children. Furthermore, ADUs can help reduce sprawl by allowing for more people to live in existing neighborhoods instead of building new developments on the outskirts of our city. This will help preserve our city's natural resources and open spaces while also reducing the need for long commutes. In conclusion, by adopting ADUs into our zoning ordinance, we can create more affordable housing options for our community while providing additional incomes. ADUs have been successfully implemented in many cities across this country and been proven to be viable solutions to affordable housing crisis. Let's not be afraid to embrace change and move forward in a positive direction for the betterment of our community. Thank you.
Thank you. And seeing as it's 6:30 on the dot, and we have the city council meeting coming into the chamber. Yeah, perfect timing. I'm going to, in a moment, ask for a motion to continue this meeting. As I said, anybody who wishes to speak on the issue, we want to hear your testimony. I appreciate the passion on both sides of this issue, evidenced by how many people are here in the chamber tonight. So I want to thank everyone, whether you had a chance to speak or not, for coming out on this topic. So Chair will entertain a motion to continue the meeting to a later date.
Motion to continue.
Seconded. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Meeting is continued. Thank you.